Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us for today. If you don't know me, I'm Martrice Gandy, a founder and executive director of MindWorks Collaborative. And our session today is about navigating the special education job market with a particular focus on career opportunities that are outside of the classroom. We have a bunch of folks ready to kind of share knowledge on their kind of career journey as they've taken on different opportunities, whether they pursue them within other organizations or created their own organizations. And so super excited to get to learn alongside of them today. We are going to start our session with our welcome, which we just did, and then we're going to jump to a mindful minute. And then we will open our panel discussion and then open the session up to the Ask Me Anything portion. And those of you who submitted questions in advance, we appreciate you. And we will try to get to all of those questions today. All right, so jumping headfirst into our mindful minute, I'm going to turn off my camera here. And so you can just listen to my voice. All right, so we do a minute at MindWorks when we start all sessions, whether that's short sessions or longer engagements, just as a time, kind of a pretext to help us all transition from being in strong work mode into getting into our evening and helping us wind down. When it comes to mindful minutes, I personally like to do this, first thing when I get to my desk in the morning, or when I was in a classroom before my students arrive. But you can just kind of start with 1 minute like we're going to do today and kind of increase the time as you see fit and fits for your schedule and your life. And so we're just going to find a soft spot to sit, a comfortable spot to sit or stand, and just stretch out your arms. Ooh, I needed to crack my back. And really kind of get your body relaxed. It doesn't really matter where you're sitting or standing, but just as long as that you can be comfortable and uninterrupted for the duration of our mindful minute. And I want you to imagine that your attention is a spotlight, that you can actively shine on wherever you choose. Once you're settled, put this direct spotlight on your breathing. So breathe in and breathe out. You continue to breathe in and breathe. I want you to observe the sensation of breathing whenever you notice it. You're going to notice the rise and fall of your chest or your abdomen. Notice how the air enters and exits your mouth and your nostrils. Do not try to change your breath. Simply notice as you inhale and you exhale. And if and when you find your attention has wandered, I want you to just gently redirect your spotlight back to your breath. If it helps with your focus, you can also just count out your breaths. And at any moment you mess up, you can always start back at 1. And continue to breathe in and breathe out. And as we come to the end of our minute of mindfulness, I want to close out with a silent kind of affirmation. So it means you say it to yourself. And you're just going to take a moment to acknowledge the time that we've just spent cultivating calm and attention by saying, I am peaceful and I am calm. And let me bring this into my life. hopefully you enjoy that moment and are ready to get started with our. So I want to take a second to introduce you to all the wonderful folks who are going to be on our call today. We're going to start with Melissa Boston, who is my co-founder at MindWorks Collaborative and our director of programs. And then we also have Pei-Ling Lee, who is clinical faculty at Urban Teachers and Johns Hopkins University. And we have Sarah, who is the executive director of the Ability Challenge. And we have Ms. Harriet Gibbs, who is the CEO of the Howard and Elizabeth Caldwell Foundation, and also an IEP chair in Baltimore City Public Schools. And so those are all of our wonderful panelists who are going to be joining us today. And our session is going to be moderated by the marvelous Ms. Ryan Reed, who's the Talent Success Manager here at MindWorks Collaborative. And so I'm going to bring Ryan on.
Hi. I'm so excited for today's panel. I definitely appreciated that mindful moment. So I'm looking forward to talking with this amazing panel about how we can navigate the special education job market. This is part 2 of our session. Last session, if you could go and watch it, it was all about, opportunities at the school level. So let's look at the other options that we have as special educators to make an impact.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And I'm going to bring on all of our panelists for our first question.
Hi, ladies.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
So nice to see you. So for our first question, it is directed to everyone, and we just want to do some storytelling. And we would like to know, what is your career story? What did you do? Why did you do it? And then how did you get there? So if we could start with Harriet.
Okay. So my story is, currently I am an IEP chair for Baltimore City Public Schools. However, it all began 26 years ago. Special education was not something that I was pursuing at the time because my bachelor's technically is in mass communications. However, I came along at a time, I think there was like a shortage of teachers, and I decided that I was going to go for an interview. And when I went for that interview as a special educator, I was hired. So that's how my story really started with Baltimore City Schools. And once I got into the program of being a teacher, I fell in love with special education. And then from there, I wanted to see how else I could contribute to students with disabilities. So that's how the Howard and Elizabeth Caldwell Foundation came to be, because we wanted to also make an impact on students when they want to pursue college careers and be able to offer them scholarships. So that's my journey to special education.
Thanks so much for telling your story. What happens after K-12 is so important to the success of people with disabilities. So I truly appreciate that effort. Pei-Ling, can you tell us more about your career story? What do you do? Why did you do it? And how did you get there?
So hi everyone, I'm Pei-Ling. So what do? I am clinical faculty focused on special education at Urban Teachers, Johns Hopkins. So I mainly teach novice teachers, graduate students who are about to become teachers or teaching their first year, and we really focus on special education. And most of them are general education teachers, but giving them a lens into special education. Why do I do it? I think it's so important for everyone to really understand inclusion, understand strategies, and really be as well equipped as you can to be a teacher. And I mean, as we can see from the statistics and the data, that 80 to 85% of our students with IEPs do spend most of their time within the general education classroom. So it's so important that our gen ed teachers are up to speed as well. And kind of it all started when I was an undergrad. I was elementary education major, looking to be kind of a classroom teacher. And I happened to be the year where the school decided to change their program to comply with state law to say that if you are in any sort of education program as a major, you have to double up and be duly certified and be both elementary and special education. And this is in the state of New York, I think showing my age now, year 2000 or so. And that was kind of my first kind of exposure into special education and what it means to be a special ed teacher. And I just found it fascinating and so much to learn. And actually, I started it when I graduated as an ABA therapist for early intervention to get more hands-on experience. I felt like the coursework was interesting, but my student teaching placements were all in gen ed classrooms. So yeah, my career story started from there, which led me to lots of different places and different settings and different contexts and different roles within, I guess, gen ed and in special ed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I always think that being a special educator forces you to be more innovative and creative in your teaching strategies. So I enjoy being a special educator as well. And Sarah, can you tell us about your career story?
Okay, it helps if I'm not muted. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be here. My career path was slightly different in that I was actually never a classroom teacher. I came to special education through a legal career and ended up doing administrative work, working through policy and legal issues related to special education in the alternative school district in New York. They said, here you go, here's some special ed, you're a lawyer, figure out IDEA. And as I like to say, the rest was history, because I really found a passion and a love for both the policy and the student population. And so I've been working in it ever since. And now, fast forward many years, I started my organization, the Ability Challenge, in 2018 to work with a broader range of schools and districts to build better and more collaborative systems for supporting students with disabilities. And so, like Pei-Ling, we work primarily with general educators, but we also do work with special educators to build more inclusive settings in classrooms and schools.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think that's something that we forget sometimes, that there are so many different parts to this story, and we need the village in order to best support the growth of our students. So thank you for that work. And last but definitely not least, Melissa, can you tell us about your career story?
Sure. So, I mean, for me, it started off really not having a clue about this population. I knew nothing. I didn't know much about students with disabilities. And a girlfriend of mine, when I moved to Maryland from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area where I went to college and grew up, she, told me about, working at this institution out in Southern Maryland. It was my first exposure to the population. And from there, I really can't tell you at that time I knew what it was or I thought it would be a career. No, I don't believe that. But kind of got ushered into teaching because, I had the ability to like mentor. And I think some of my basketball background came in around the leadership and kind of, team approach. So I was hired to work at a school that had a residential as well as a day school program. And that was very eye-opening. So I was a provisional teacher, kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I met this gentleman who was to become the principal, who really had a plan for the school and exposed me to who would later become my people. And that is the folks at George Washington University, teaching students with emotional and behavioral disabilities in their special education department. And once I linked up with these folks, the time in the classroom, invaluable. The time in schools, invaluable. My experience, I would never take that away. I mean, that to me is like the heart of it. But along the way, I had to learn, how to do this the right way. So GW is where I started, and it's where I will finish my PhD work. And I will continue to kind of figure out what I want to do and how I want to affect change in this field. But I love teaching, our novice educators. So that's been a wonderful experience with GW, as well as doing consulting work, program development, program evaluation, anything SPED related, coaching of school leaders as well has been a really good joy of mine. So now I kind of sit in this place with special education as well as kind of that at-risk population. But yeah, that's currently where I am. And I am so fortunate to have landed softly with MindWorks and kind of grown and evolved with the work we're doing. And I so look forward to it. So I can say for right now, this is kind of where I am, but where I'm going, I honestly, I'm not certain. I'm enjoying having the ability to dabble in these different places. So
thank you so much for sharing your story. I think in order for us to grow, we always need coaches. So this next question is for Sarah and Harriet, and it is, what is one thing you know about running a business now that you wish that you knew prior to starting? And we'll go with Harriet first.
Okay. So the things that I wish I had really known about basically is just the amount of hours that you have to really put into your business, especially when you are working full time. Also, the different type of protocols that are really needed. For instance, your hiring protocols, working with, accountants to make sure that the business is running, having systems in place, and really thinking that through and creating a budget to have those things in place that you feel will help your business thrive. Mm-hmm. And also, for me, also working and maintaining an engaged board, keeping them engaged throughout the process. That is something I wish I had known more about before starting this venture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the people that you have on your team really make a difference. Going back to what Melissa was saying about coaching, it's really about the team. So Sarah, can you give us a little tip on how you're able to run your business and what you wish you knew before?
Yeah, so I have, it's a privilege and a bit of a challenge, but because I'm also a consultant in my other work, I have the ability to be flexible in my time. I think what's been a big eye opener for me is the quick change between balancing planning and then sort of the unknown / go with the flow feeling of running your business, and sort of being able to switch back and forth at a moment's notice. And sometimes when you don't even know that it switched back and forth. So you could spend all the time planning and then all of a sudden the plans are gone because the thing that you thought was going to happen isn't happening. And so the one thing I wish I had known is just like how to really embrace the flexibility and the unknown. I'm still learning it, and but it makes it sort of a wild ride.
Mm-hmm. If anything, COVID-19 taught us, it is flexibility and resiliency. Yep. For sure. So our next question is for Pei-Ling and Melissa. And the question is all around higher ed. So what are the positives about working in higher ed and or teaching training programs? So what are the positives and negatives about working in higher ed and or teacher training programs?
For myself, A huge plus, a real positive for me is being able to work with like these new generation of teachers, just seeing them come in and having, so much heart. They put so much critical thought. They really think about the education system. They think about their lessons with intentionality. They put students at the center. For me, like it's really inspiring to see like what they have come in with is like, I was like, wow, like that's amazing what you're coming in with, because I didn't have any of that coming in. So it's really inspiring work. And I get a lot of reward for myself, like being able to have these really deep and wide conversations with the teachers and see their practice and knowing that you're just like a little bit part of it. So that for me is a real positive. Something I maybe not enjoy as much in higher education is probably the grading. And my background is elementary and younger kids, so grading is a whole new thing for me. So it's you have to be really, really thoughtful about your feedback, and it takes a lot of time, and it's very meticulous, and it's just a little bit on the newer side for me. And I would say that overall, I really enjoy being on the other side in higher education. So I mostly taught younger kids before this. I was a bit nervous about being with adults mostly, and it's been a wonderful experience so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually have an urban teacher fellow in my classroom right now, and she is absolutely amazing. So you guys at your team, you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Melissa, what are some positives and negatives of working in higher ed or teacher training?
All right, so I wrote some things down too as you were talking, Pei-Ling, because I think they're probably going to be very similar, if not the same, in the positives. So definitely, working with the people who want to teach, right? Like that is very different than what we're used to as K through 12 educators, because, they're coming in with a whole other host of things, but also not necessarily wanting to always be there, or, just the investment level is very different. So I love teaching folks who just are really hungry to make a difference in the field. And I think that makes me feel like I'm accomplishing something, right? Because there's days with this work, especially when you're in schools and you're in K through 12, where you're like, am I even doing anything? Like, am I really making a difference? So that can be really, that can be discouraging. However, back to the point, hours and flexibility. I would say that especially, it just depending on what you have going on in your life, working in higher ed can really complement whatever you have going on very well. So if you're somebody who kind of doesn't need to be governed that much, or kind of, can accomplish things that you want to accomplish, without too much oversight, that is how it is at higher ed. And that can be like a good thing and also not a good thing. But I also just, in returning back and doing my PhD work, research, period, point blank. There's no other way to argue it. Research informs practice. And so that's the best part of it, being right there in the heart of the research. Negatives, I would say the pay, not that great. But again, you can supplement. So there are really cool things you can do there. Sometimes, the collaboration thing, you'll still kind of feel that, right? Like it's still this work in special ed. It's still this work with, kids with disabilities. And so it's not, it's not like the big thing that everybody's looking to do, right? It's not the big money maker at your school. So you just have to understand that as well. But other than that, like Pei-Ling, I love it. I will probably always be affiliated until the day that I no longer can work or make sense. I will be affiliated with the university.
I love that passion, Melissa.
Thank you.
So the next question is about fundraising. So what should we consider when trying to raise money for a new venture? And Sarah, you can go first.
All right. Am I muted or am I unmuted?
We hear you clear.
All right. I'm unmuted this time. So I think a few things that I've learned about fundraising are number one, that foundations want to see evidence of traction and success, and they're less likely to go for the new and potentially unproven. So that's been a really interesting thing to learn as I've been like, oh, I have really great ideas. Why won't people fund me? That I think has been really interesting to learn. And I think the other sort of less obvious thing that I've learned is to be creative in terms of thinking about how to raise money and what that means. Because it's not necessarily a given that because you're a nonprofit that you have to raise money from foundations and grants. I've been designing my programming around the fee-for-service and earned revenue models because our goal is to work with schools and districts, and we do work with schools and districts, and so there is money there that can support that work. But on the flip side, we also want to make sure that our programming and our services remain accessible. And so that's where something like FEDWORK could and does supplement the fees.
Yeah, and I think another pro right now is because of the pandemic, people are more collaborative and we have more community around that. So you can look at other organizations and see what they're doing to be successful during this time. Harriet, what about you? What should we consider when trying to raise money to launch new ventures?
So for me, coming from the nonprofit aspect as well, for me, it's trying to make sure, one, that the board is also vested in the fundraiser. And then we need to come up with a plan. How will we try to obtain the money, whether we go to private donors? Are we going to try to do something online? Or are we looking for grants that can support that venture? So those are a couple ideas that I have that when you're looking to start a new venture, some of the things you may want to consider, again, the private donors, doing it online, and again, if there's a grant to support that venture. But you said something earlier too, in collaboration with other organizations is also powerful, because we did that this year in order to raise money. So connections and partnerships are definitely one way to go as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, there's power across networking together. Mm-hmm. So our next question, we have, how should I showcase my impact on students, teachers, and families? Question is for Pei-Ling and Melissa. Pei-Ling, you want to go first this time? Or wait a minute, I think Melissa went. Melissa, let's go first this time.
Okay.
Last.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. I think it really depends on, where you're trying to showcase, right? So in an interview, you're going to obviously bring a portfolio and talk about a lot of the projects that you've done. If you are somebody who's looking to kind of venture out, right? Like you've reached a point where, you've got some skills and maybe those skills, someone could use those, right? Somebody could benefit from what your knowledge. So that's what I would do. I would sit and first think about, like, what am I good at, right? What do I already know? So naturally for me, coming out of K through 12, I was good at behavior management stuff. I was good with coaching and leadership development, and then program development. So that from there, I created a visual, right? Like, so what does that mean under each one of those categories? And then from there, you start talking about and sharing, what it is that you do, and how that looks is really kind of going to be dependent on you and your personality. I remember when I first started, it was like an email. Let me send some sort of email, like saying, hey, these are the professional developments I can do. I'm available to do coaching or whatever you want. And I kind of use people within my network. So kind of like friends of friends, and just kind of, let them know, hey, I'm venturing out to do some things on my own. And this is what my skill set is. And, really being able to talk with, once you do score, on meeting with somebody, really being able to, again, show your portfolio, talk about the things that you've had success with, whether it is increase in those data points, like with, student improvement in math or in reading, whatever that is. But you want to definitely make sure that folks can kind of see and be left with something to ponder and to think about. And I think the other key component, and this is one thing that I wasn't very good at when, like, in the beginning of my career, and it took me being pushed out of my comfort zone and returning back to school, where me just kind of putting myself out there, right? Like networking and really just, talking with people about my work, joining different groups or, connecting with other people. Because really for me, it's more about, in my opinion, it's more about, chasing what it is that you're passionate about. Like, these are the things that drive me. And if somebody's going to pay me to do it, well, that's even better, right? So I think, so those are kind of some of the things that you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it goes back to the beginning where we were talking about storytelling. And when you get an opportunity to be in those spaces to tell your personal story about how you're making an impact or how somebody has been impacted from the work that you do. So, Pei-Ling, what about you? How can you showcase your impact?
I definitely agree with Melissa. I think same kind of a sentiment in the beginning about networking. Like, oh, don't make me do it. Please don't make me talk to these strangers about myself. But actually, it was one of the, I think, best things to do. I've met so many wonderful people there. I've made so many great connections. And really, when you find people who have the same interest or passions as you do, the conversation comes quite easily. So I would definitely echo that, and definitely finding, at least in DC, there's a lot of these different kind of network groups, like young professionals, education professionals, et cetera, that are out there that you kind of, just have to push yourself to do a little bit. At least for me, that was. I think another piece about showcasing your impact, I think, like Melissa, depending where you are and what you're trying to showcase, when I was working with students, I was making sure that I was keeping track of their data, making sure I was showing progress, especially when you're working with students with IEP, right? You're supposed to be data collecting anyway. So really making sure that you have the evidence, the data to back up. You said, I made an impact by, and then showing the evidence to do it. And then when I was working with teachers, when I was doing professional development and coaching, I made sure to always have some sort of exit survey, something that I can quantify to show others when the time came to say, like, actually 95% of teachers that I've coached have said it's made, a 5 out of 5 for the impact on their teaching, right? I made to quantify it. I made sure it was concrete. Because when you step outside the classroom and usually outside the school world, people are very number driven. They're very results driven. They want to see, what is your achievement? You said you've done this, but how do I know? So I tended to started collecting more kind of hard data, and also part of, like, I think Melissa's saying research, right? Like, kind of drills that into you when you're doing these doctorate programs. I'm like, everybody needs a survey. Everybody doesn't need a survey, but that was kind of like my mindset at the time. And kind of using those numbers and kind of like speaking kind of that corporate language, or just being outside the classroom language, thinking like, oh, these are my results, these are my achievement, and here is my evidence to show. And visuals, like Melissa said, are really powerful. Pictures, take lots and lots of pictures, document your work with the students or in the classroom to say, like, when you say that, I reinforce expectations, show them the visual of those anchor charts in your classroom. It really is powerful when you put in a portfolio and when you showcase it like that. And with families, sometimes, I've kept in touch with so many families I've worked with in the past, and I think, having a family kind of on your behalf say something or write you a letter or show something can be really powerful to show the impact that you've had with them.
I was going to mention, and I somehow got distracted, but that's a really good point. And it kind of backs up to, so, we've probably at one point in our lives, especially those of us like, who are full-fledged professional adults, have heard people say it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, I don't agree with the part about it's you do need to know some things, in my opinion. And because we're dealing with children, we're dealing with, people, human beings and their real lives, right? So, I mean, there's so much more to our work than just kind of like, a product or something. But there very much is so much to consider around, when you're networking, like who you know, right? Like if you're in your field, whatever your profession is, you should know who the people are, like who are the folks offering, whatever, whether it's education or an internship or, a business, like you should know kind of who your people are. You should know who your competitors are, right? So like, it's really important to understand that part of the skill that is required if you're going to step outside and, like an organization and create your own business or market yourself, that you really do need to know people. And there have been plenty of times where my work has spoken for itself or my reputation for itself. And I wasn't even in the room, but it was because people who were in the room that I worked with or who, had the experience with me could share about my work. And I think that is equally as powerful. If there is a client or somebody in the field who actually is also well known, when they start talking about you and saying your name, things are going to start moving. And so that's just important for you to understand that you also have to get out there and really.
Mm-hmm. That's a great segue into our next question for all panelists and about networking. So how did you build those partnerships for networking and build your potential client list? And we can go with Pay first.
Okay, let me think a little bit about this one. My partner networks and potential client list. I think definitely what I started with is making sure that I think exactly like said, who are the people that I need to be in touch with? Who are the people that are kind of shakers and movers in the field that you're working in? I think that's really important to know. And definitely joining a lot of different type of networks or groups that you can be part of. I researched a lot into that. I read through kind of like their statements and their missions and making sure it's aligned with what I believed in and joining in on those events and making sure I participated. You kind of start there. And then I think it's also really important to always keep in touch. Even just like a little email here or a little bit email there just to say, hello, how are you doing? Just checking in. Or, oh, I read this article and I thought about that conversation we had, right? Finding points to have touch points with the people that you have met and you want to continue to have relationships with. Yeah, I think that's kind of where I started.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely about the authentic relationships that we create and building relationships with like-minded people. One thing that I did to push myself to networking is go on something called Lunch Club, and that allows me to meet people who have like-minded interests. Sarah, what about you? How do you build your network?
Good question. So I would say number one, get a good CRM, customer relationship management software. I don't know. You can even do it in an Excel spreadsheet, but just keep track of people who you talk to and what you talk about. Just a couple of notes. I have one that just automatically scours my email and puts it all together for me, so I don't even have to do anything. I find that very helpful for remembering the contacts. And I think the other thing that I do is I just talk to anyone who will talk to me, basically. And I, at the end of a conversation, if somebody has said, oh, you should talk to my friend, blah, 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 then I follow up with the person I was talking to and I say, hey, it would be really great if you could make an introduction to that person. And here's a blurb. So all you have to do is forward it and pretend you wrote it. And usually that ends up getting me another conversation with someone else. And then that just keeps going. It is not an efficient use of time because it ends up with me having a lot of conversations with people. But it certainly gives you practice pitching your idea. It gives you an incredible network of people that you can call. And pretty much everybody, at least everybody that I've connected with, has just been really willing to help and connect if you make it easy for them. So, even how I got in touch with MindWorks is I just reached out to Martrice over the internet and I was like, hey, I think what we're doing is similar. Let's chat. And we went out to lunch. So.
That's amazing. Harriet, what do you think? How are you able to build your network?
Sorry. Pretty much the ladies have already said it. It's through a variety of networking opportunities. And for me, also being affiliated with different organizations, such as we're part of the Maryland Nonprofit Association. So they have conferences, different networking opportunities for you to get out and meet other people. And I think Pei-Ling said it. And then you're looking for organizations that will align with your mission. And from there, that's how we pretty much build our email list, is through networking.
And Melissa, I'm just going to bring in real quick and start with a question that is from a guest. And it says, how do you cold introduce schools and families?
On mute.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, how do you do cold introductions to schools and families? Okay, so maybe if you're kind of marketing yourself or even your own business. My entryway into consulting was, I think, a little different than, well, I don't know if it's different. Let me just say this. Because I went back to school at the university, the university oftentimes, like, it's connected, especially in the program that I was, affiliated with. We have, schools that we have partnerships with. So, I mean, already there's kind of that family. So plenty of you mentioned kind of calling, Sarah just did mention, like, calling on the fact that, you have a relationship with somebody that I have a relationship with. So I would use that often and all the time. So I think that probably backs up to what Ms. Gibbs is saying. Like, you have to be affiliated with something, that kind of helps you, get yourself in the door. If it's just you by yourself, again, I would look for a connection through a principal, somebody who works there that you can get to the principal, so that you can start talking about your work and kind of what, you have to offer. This is my thing. There's always somebody who has a need. You may have that fit. You may be able to give them, fit their need, and that's bringing your skill set to them. So don't be discouraged by, if you're not getting people calling you back, or, they're just kind of like, just not taking you seriously. You just, like Sarah said, you got to kind of like keep going and keep pushing. And eventually somebody will come to the surface that needs your particular skill set. And that's where all the stuff we talked about in the last question and answer around making good on, like, what it is you should be doing in that contract, right? And really meeting the goals they want you to meet. So I do think that it can be challenging, but I would just look for somebody to try to get you an in. Was that helpful?
Just to jump in here to say, when I first moved to DC, there was a lot of this, just recommending myself, a lot of cold calling. And something I found really useful is having something that kind of like personalizes a little bit, or something that stands out a little bit, either in that email or that phone call, like share a little bit something personal, or having a fun meme at the end, or having a quote that like really kind of really that like draws you to the quote about how you view education, or whatever it is that you are doing that reason that you're doing it, something to give them a little more impression, because they probably do get, a few emails and a few people coming to talk to them. And it's like thinking about what's going to leave a bit impression, what's going to make me a little bit more different, a little bit more that they're going to remember me when, let's say, the time, maybe because right now they may not need the skill, but later on they might.
Yeah, I'm jumping in. It looks like Ryan's computer froze, so I'll jump in for her for a second. One of the questions that we had submitted prior to this session is, where can I look for a job outside of the classroom if I just don't even know where to start? If I don't have those connections, I don't already have those relationships, how do I begin to look for a job outside of the classroom?
I mean, I guess to me, I would say, okay, well, let's take a look at like that next step outside of the classroom, because you kind of got to know what it is that you want to do. So I think I would go back to what it is that you're trying to do outside of the classroom. What am I good at? And then from there, it just really depends how you want to pursue that. But I think that you are going to have to kind of do that research ahead of time to know how you're going to, make your next move. Okay, you might be like, oh, I want to sew uniforms for all the kids who don't have them and can't afford them, but there might not be like a job doing that. You know what I mean? Like, you really have to do your research around that. Don't just leap. Make sure there's something for you to land on.
One of the things that I recommend to folks is to start getting newsletters from organizations that have either missions that are aligned to the work that you do, or that publish interesting things, and just start like collecting them. And you can even put them in like a roll up or something so that you don't get a gazillion emails. But they'll oftentimes have some job postings, and you can start to see even like, what are people looking for? And you can get a sense of like, who are the organizations that do work that I think is good. Might not always then lead you to apply for a job and get that job, but it start to get familiar with the different organizations that are in your issues.
Yeah, thanks. The next question is, for you guys who are running ventures, are you working full time and running your venture, or do you have some other type of arrangement? And how are you guys balancing it?
Doesn't matter.
And anybody?
Okay, I'll go. I work full time and manage the Howard and Elizabeth Caldwell Foundation. Balance. I don't think I do well with balance on that, because working full time and then, with the whole pandemic and the transition of doing the virtual learning at home. And so I'm running meetings from home. So it's like everything is done at home. So I don't feel at this time I really have a good balance. I just try to make sure that I do all that I need to do. So often at the last minute, I may be up trying to prepare for a board meeting, getting documents ready to go out. Then the next day I'm preparing for IEP meeting. So that's an area that I need to work on to get better in, but it has been challenging. But the one thing I can say, if you are passionate about whatever you do, it can be done.
Thanks so much for bearing with me, my tech issues.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, Ryan. Ms. Gibbs was just answering that question. If anybody else wanted to jump in.
I'll answer. So I go back and forth between running my venture full time and doing consulting work full time, and I'm happiest when those two things can overlap. But I also have a hard time with the balance. I think sometimes I feel like I don't have enough going on, and sometimes I feel like I have way too much going on. And so when I have way too much going on, I try to remember to be thankful that I have a lot going on. I think one of the nice things about being a consultant and doing my venture is that I can at least be flexible about when I do all my work. So I have a young daughter, and I try to keep sort of the after school dinner time open, which means that oftentimes I'm working at night, but that's important to me to be able to do.
Sarah, you kind of are a perfect segue into the next question we have from the chat, and I want you to be able to answer this before you have to hop off. But where do you kind of recommend looking for RFPs, especially whether it's as a consultant and or as part of your venture?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that question. I don't know. I find RFPs in weird places.
Yeah.
And just random. So I'm not terribly systematic when it comes to trying to find them. I don't know if anyone else has a better answer to that question.
I mean, I know that the university oftentimes will know about different RFPs. So again, it's my connections with people that tell me about things. So I'm glad to hear that, Sarah, because I'm not very methodical about it or systematic either. You want to be, but when you're doing all these things, I mean, we just said mother, running 2 jobs, working at night, there's a lot going on, and you have to be very self-disciplined to do consulting work. If you need somebody there to kind of tell you when to arrive and when to leave, or you don't do well under conditions that are loose and just you with your own accountability, then I would say you probably would not be the best candidate, or maybe, you might struggle a little bit. But I think again, a lot of my stuff has come back to, I make sure I nurture my relationships with people. In the beginning of my career, I didn't really care. I was head down. I'm a principal, I'm going to do this work. But really getting out here and kind of having the ability to be free and pick and choose my work and what I want to engage in, it's just really important for you to understand, how much responsibility it is, and kind of who the people are that got your back. I mean, really. So I have people that call me because we've worked well together. I've reached out to people to subcontract on things with me too. I make sure I look out for people. So I feel as if I get that in return. But there isn't anything where I'm scouring all of the different. Sometimes you put a lot of effort into that and you get nowhere. So I don't know. Just one of those things.
Sometimes, I mean, you can also use Google, because that's what I do sometimes. Just use Google and try to find some of them as well. And also when you're affiliated with the different programs, such as the nonprofit association, you can use them to call too and find out different RFPs as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Then we have another question in the chat. It says, do you recommend developing any specific skill before trying to venture out of the classroom? So if you're in the classroom and you want to venture out, is there a certain skill that you should spend a little bit more time on before moving out?
I think one really obvious one is talking to adults and kind of having more of a business mind around the work that you're going to do. That's not going to come naturally to you as an educator. So there's kind of that business side of things that you have to ensure that you're well versed in, or at least you're comfortable in negotiations and certain things of that nature. But I also think, yes, I mean, you should be able to walk into a room of adults who already know something about the topic or a lot about the topic, and be able to still impart on them something, right? They walk away from the experience with you having, gotten something out of it. So there's a certain amount of, yes, you have to know your craft and you have to know what you're talking about. So the ability to get up there and kind of, even publicly speak, right? If you're going to run a PD or something, or if you're going to be a guest lecturer in a classroom, any of those things are going to require that you have the skills to get up and articulate yourself, comfortably, not being nervous, and really get people really invested in what you're doing. So those are some things you can practice. Taking you back to your bachelor degree days when you had to do like public speaking and everything on topics you didn't want to and you're terrified.
Yeah, I would say I think first it depends about what you want to do outside of the classroom. What are you venturing out to do? I think know that for yourself first. And then think about what are the skills you already do have? What are some carryover skills? What are some things that you know that are your strong points that build you up as a teacher, right? Maybe you're super organized and you make really great spreadsheets, which was not me. But take an inventory, right? And also then know kind of on a broader aspect, know yourself. Am I a data-driven person? Am I a person who's really strong at relationships? And then thinking about that to then develop what you would need outside of that classroom. So I think first and foremost is knowing what you want to do outside that classroom, and then thinking about what you already have as strengths, and then to cultivate the ones that aren't. Something for me that was really helpful when I was leaving the classroom was this process where you really had to reflect on what are the things that you were good at and what do you heavily relied on and what are the areas you needed to grow. And one of the things was the data and details, kind of really be very specific and meticulous with details. And I worked so hard on that. And that was actually really helpful when I became a special ed coordinator, because it's all about, keeping track and being meticulous of the legal aspects. So that really helped me to figure out my insights, like what are the areas I want to grow. Hope that's a little bit helpful.
Yeah, that's excellent. And Harriet, do you have any advice? What skills do you need to focus on while you're still in the classroom?
Well, I think the ladies pretty much covered it, but I think, being a great communicator, being able to communicate with your families, the students, and as Melissa said, if you have to do PDs, being willing to step up and step out and do those things. And then again, it depends on what you want to do, because like in my journey, I started as a special educator resource teacher. Then I moved up to the IEP chair rank. So, thinking about what you want to do and then trying to go through those steps to get you there.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, with that conversation, I thought about an organization that people can look at called Toastmasters, and you can use that program to help grow your skills in the area of public speaking.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Toastmasters. All right, I'm going to have to check that out.
Thank you, Ryan, for moderating our panel. I appreciate you. And thank you to all of our panelists who jumped on and answered our call to share their insights into, either working for some bigger organizations and or starting their own ventures. Sarah had to pop off because she had another engagement. But she said it is fine to share her contact information. And so, if you are connected to us on our social media, which apparently you must be if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, all of our panels have been tagged there. And then we also can kind of send out a follow-up email if you registered in our Eventbrite page. With folks' contact information if you want to have any more information for them. And if you are not connected to us, again, through any of those means, just feel free to email myself, Melissa, or Ryan and ask for folks' information, and we will try to get that to you as soon as possible. So again, thank you, Ms. Gibbs and Sarah and Pei-Ling and Melissa and Ryan. I deeply appreciate each and every one of you. And we hope to be able to continue this conversation moving forward with the rest of our talented Tuesday chats led by the illustrious Ryan Reed. Also, if you are not yet part of our online community, go ahead and make sure that you are. You can join using this kind of link, and it takes you to all of our different communities where you can kind of connect with us. And we have a sub kind of group that is specifically focused on the talent area. And so Ryan posts job posts and resume tips as well as like she offers some resume kind of like one-on-one kind of like walkthroughs and coaching. And so make sure you connect with her there. And if you are, the question came up earlier around like RFPs. And if you're looking for RFPs, and whether you're a clinician or a special ed teacher or an advocate or a tutor or any of those things, you can also use that link to sign up for announcements on those items through our talent matching platform as well. And again, have a great evening. Thank you, and see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Next time,
Thank you.
everyone.